一场火药味十足的访谈正在上演。可以，这位印度女主持对面坐着的是马凯硕，她注定讨不到便宜。视频开场，印度女主持人语气强硬，几乎带着愤怒质问马凯硕：“中国人现在就坐在印度领土上。”他提到拉达克边境的紧张局势已经持续了6、7个月，甚至指出印中士兵在那里的距离只有200、300米。主持人不断追问：既然中国侵占印度领土，印度又怎么能跟这样的国家组成区域贸易集团？这其实是许多印度媒体在国内一再炒作的论调，也再次将中印边境问题推向风口，字里行间满是对中国的不满与质疑，试图以领土争端为由，否定中印之间任何合作的可能性。
This. I mean, the Chinese are sitting on Indian territory, have been for the last 6 or 7 months in Ladakh. You know that Indian and Chinese soldiers may not be eyeball to eyeball, but they're separated by, 200 or 300 meters. Now, how do you expect India to be part of a big trading organization when the other big power, China, is sitting on your own territory?
面对这样的挑衅性提问，马凯硕没有被带节奏，而是非常冷静地调整了语气，用一个出乎意料的角度回击。他没有正面争辩到底是谁的领土，而是提到了一个耐人寻味的比较。你知道吗？越南才是最了解和中国打交道的国家。马凯硕接着详细解释，越南与中国做了2000年邻居，曾被中国占领1000年，1979年还爆发过战争，双方投入的士兵各达50万。这场冲突的激烈程度远超印度经历过的任何边境摩擦，且时间更晚。更关键的是，越南也曾声称中国在南海占领其岛屿，但如今中国却是越南的头号贸易伙伴。马凯硕以此点明核心，在地缘政治中没有完美的黑白解决方案，你必须学会接受不完美，暗指印度不应将边境问题绝对化，而忽视国家间多元的利益关联。这番话其实是在劝印度，在地缘政治中不存在完美的正义。有时候你得学会在不完美的现实中生存。真正成熟的国家会学会与自己不喜欢的国家共处，那不是屈服，而是地缘政治的理性选择。
India's problems with China are serious but fairly recent. Vietnam has been a neighbor of China for 2,000 years.
Right.
Vietnam was occupied by China for 1,000 years. Vietnam fought a war with China more recently than India has. There were at least 500,000 Vietnamese soldiers fighting 500,000 Chinese soldiers in the 1979 war. India has not had that big a war, right? Until 1979, one of the most heavily militarized borders in the world was the Vietnam-China border. You want to talk of difficulties with China? Ask the Vietnamese. Now, fast forward today.
Yeah.
Which country is the #1 trading partner of Vietnam? It's China. And
Right.
by the way, Vietnam claims that China is occupying islands that belong to Vietnam in the South China Sea.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm telling you all this because in geopolitics, if you think there's a perfect black and white solution, there's no such thing in geopolitics. You have to learn to live with imperfections. So the Vietnamese are obviously very unhappy with what China is doing in the South China Sea to them. But at the same time, they want to grow their economy. And they said, okay, I'll put this aside. I'll focus on growing the economy. So one thing about Indians is that they expect the world to be black and white. It is not black and white.
Why do you say that?
Everybody, and because that we all learn to live and work with countries that we may not necessarily.
在镜头另一侧，女主持人明显有点愣住。她原本希望马凯硕站在道德高地批评中国，但没想到他直接从亚洲内部经验出发，拿越南的现实打脸了印度的情绪式对华认知。他此时开始急了，试图反击。他追问马凯硕：“那你是不是在暗示莫迪总理也在用非黑即白的方式看世界？”这个问题其实带有陷阱，想逼他批评印度领导人。但马凯硕依然保持外交家的冷静。他笑了笑，说：“我没有说莫迪总理喜欢这种方式，但我确实听印度朋友讲过， 世界上几乎没有哪两位领导人像莫迪和习近平那样花这么多时间在一起。他用轻描淡写的语气提醒主持人，莫迪并非被中国蒙蔽，反而深知复杂的边境博弈，只是公开表态上更克制。马凯硕随后引用莫迪本人的话，没有中国军队在印度领土上。他明确表示，既然莫迪总理都在公开场合说过这句话，那他选择相信。这段回应其实很微妙，他既没有否认印度的安全关切，又用印度自己领导人的话打破了主持人的被侵占叙事。从外交逻辑上看，这是一种以彼之矛攻彼之盾的巧妙策略。马凯硕并没有为中国辩护，而是用印度政府的官方立场，要求印度媒体尊重事实。
Because that's the way life.
Why do you say that Prime Minister Modi likes the world to be black and white? Or why does India like the world to be black and white?
I didn't say Prime Minister Modi likes it.
India. That's right.
Indeed, what my Indian friends told me, he said, Kishore, there's no leader, no two leaders in the world have spent as much time together. Yeah, you look at it mathematically. So I don't say that about Prime Minister Modi. Now, like on the border question, let me tell you, I'm not an expert, okay? I don't know the details, but I do know that Prime Minister Modi has said categorically, okay, on record, that there are no Chinese forces on Indian territory. He has said that. So the question is, if Prime Minister Modi says it, I believe it, right?
Right.
主持人试图扭转话题，说这是一种僵局状态，双方都不肯退让，也无法解决问题。他暗示莫迪可能在巧妙处理边境问题，不想被国内民族主义压力裹挟。马凯硕没有接茬，而是转向了他最擅长的学者视角。他讲述了自己在新加坡李光耀公共政策学院的经历。我们每年都会邀请印度和中国的资深退休官员在学院里闭门讨论。然后他拿出一本厚厚的书《劳特利奇印度中国关系手册》，对着镜头展示。看看它有多厚，这说明两国关系极其复杂，不能只盯着边境问题。他直言，周恩来、邓小平都曾向印度提议接受实际控制线并与之共存，但印度并未接受这一方案。即便2005年曼莫汉、辛格政府时期达成过边界问题指导原则协议，后续也因各种原因未能推进，但这并不意味着没有解决争端的可能。关键在于不能把所有事情都压在一个问题上。那一刻，镜头里的他几乎像个教授在上国际关系课，而主持人像个被老师点名纠错的学生。
So in that case, it's a bit of an impasse, isn't it? We know that, whether or not Prime Minister Modi was trying to finesse the situation because there are probably ongoing talks with the Chinese on this question. There is a difference about the border, the line of actual control. I mean, all that aside. But the question is, at the moment, there is an impasse. How does one...
There has been an impasse for a long time. And as you know, when I was dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, every year we would invite senior retired Indian officials and senior retired Chinese officials to come and talk in the Lee Kuan Yew School. And by the way, the net result is something you should really ask your viewers to look at. Look at this. The Routledge Handbook of India-China Relations. See how thick it is?
Right.
The reason I tell you why this is important is because this is a very complex relationship, and some of the world's best professors. This book just came out 2-3 months ago, by the way. Mm-hmm. And it is a very complex relationship. There are many dimensions to it. Don't just focus on one dimension. The border clearly is a problem. And as you know, and this is what Indians told me, at least 3 times the Chinese leaders, Zhou Enlai, Deng Xiaoping, proposed to India and said, we are not going to change the border. Why don't we accept the line of control and live with it? And as you know, this is a fact. India did not accept that offer.
But in April,
there were opportunities in the past to deal with this. And I still believe that there are ways and means of dealing with border disputes.
And a little
time, you must, in a complex relationship like this, you don't hold everything hostage.
女主持人这是插话， 说中国在2005年后撤回了承诺，边界谈判毫无进展。他强调，如果连地图都不交换，怎么解决问题？这是一种典型的印度论点，强调中方不透明。马凯硕没有被带节奏，而是再次降温。我不是中印边界问题专家，但我知道你不能因为一个问题就否定整个关系。他顺势重申越南的例子，越南的岛屿被中国占了，但他们仍保持合作关系，因为他们知道一个问题不能毁掉一切。这话听起来简单，但在东南亚语境里是对印度外交的一种温和批评，太情绪化，太容易被民族主义舆论裹挟。
I think a little bit of an update on those earlier proposals between, say, Deng Xiaoping and Rajiv Gandhi, or Chao En-lai and Nehru even before, is that in 2005, when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister of India, there was an agreement of guiding principles is that how to resolve the border between the two countries. But then a couple of years later, the Chinese withdrew from that. And subsequently, there has been, keep having these talks between special representatives, but nothing comes of it. The Chinese refuse to even exchange maps. Yeah. So if you don't even exchange maps, then how are you going to resolve something as complex as this?
Yeah, as I told you, Jyoti, I am not an expert on the China-India border issue.
Yeah, you do know.
If you want to talk to an expert, Kanti Bajpai, the editor of this volume, is amazing in his knowledge. And you're right. I agree with you that the Chinese have made mistakes. I mean, I have no question whatsoever in the management of the border issue. But I'm saying, only point I'm making is that there are hundreds of issues between China and India. And you got to focus on the whole picture and not on one dimension, and which is why I gave the example of Vietnam. Vietnam is very unhappy with China and about the way its islands are occupied, but at the same time, it doesn't hold that entire relation hostage to because of one issue.
女主持人转而提及印度的东进政策，质疑东盟对中国的不满是否会影响这一政策推进。马凯硕肯定了东进比向东看的进步，认为行动比观望更好，但也直指印度在这一政策上没有做太多。他给出关键观察：东南亚人喜欢印度，印度在东南亚会受到热烈欢迎，但前提是印度要拿出实际行动，而不是停留在口号层面。
ASEAN is deeply disappointed. So India's, Act East policy, that also then comes under some stress, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, what I liked about the difference between the Look East policy and the Act East policy was that I like the word act rather than look. Acting is better than looking. So, but the tragedy is that India has not done much in terms of its Act East policy. And I, by the way, India will be welcomed with open arms in Southeast Asia. And, by the way, you should know this, Southeast Asians love India. So it's important for Indians to know this, but you got to do much.
话题延伸到经济合作，女主持人隐含对自由贸易协定的担忧，马凯硕则从经济规律出发，给出犀利分析。他指出，经济自由市场理论的核心是创造性破坏，没有创造性破坏就没有经济增长。如果印度一味保护没有竞争力的现有产业，反而会拖累整体经济。他以海外印度人的成就为例，在美国的印度人设立新公司的速度比任何其他人都快，而在印度的印度人却做不到。核心原因在于文化自信与竞争意识的差异。马凯硕强调，印度拥有13亿有才华的人口，本应具备强大的竞争实力，全世界都应该害怕面对13亿印度人，而不是印度害怕开放竞争。
If you don't mind, I'll make a difficult point to you. India is right when it says when you sign free trade agreement, you get a range of cheap imports, right? But that's also part of what economic free market theory is all about. You must have creative destruction. Without creative destruction, you don't have economic growth. So if you want to preserve your current industries, which are uncompetitive, then you are actually hobbling up your own economy. So, but when you open up, when you sign free trade agreements, there are other markets that open up, and other new industries come up. And what is shocking is that Indians in the United States are setting up new companies faster than anybody else in the United States is. And Indians in India cannot set up new companies as fast as Indians overseas. Why is that the case, right? So Indians can succeed. I mean, my first book was called Can Asians Think? And I can tell you at the end of the day, competition is about cultural confidence. You must say, I can compete. And that's what the Indians have shown today. The most important thing that India needs to do is to go back to 1980. Now, what do I mean by 1980? In 1980, the size of the Indian economy was the same size as the Chinese economy.
Right.
Same, 40 years ago, it's exactly same size. 40 years later, China's economy is 5 times bigger. Now, I would say that if you really want to compete in this game, make your economy 5 times bigger. And you can do that. Because you know why? The reason why you can do that is that you have 1.3 billion very talented Indians around the world. They'll be dying. And you know what is shocking about India being frightened to open up its economy to compete? Actually, the rest of the world should be frightened of 1.3 billion Indians. Because 1.3 billion Indians, if you look at what 1 million Indians have done in California, it's amazing, right? And you know that if Indians in India can achieve half the per capita income, right, of Indians in United States, you would have by far the world's largest economy, by far.
当被问及中国人如何看待印度时，马凯硕给出了基于历史与文明的视角。中国会希望与印度再共处2000年，在过去2000年的大部分时间里，中国人认为印度文明与中国文明是平等的，并且非常尊重印度文明。他特别澄清，印度从未向中国进贡过，这与越南、朝鲜等国家不同，因此印度没必要痴迷于进贡相关的心态纠结，而应聚焦于实际利益的考量。
How do the Chinese look at India? 2 big powers, 2 Asian powers. Now, there's been, a lot of sort of criticism about China, of it having this middle kingdom complex, that we're the Dadas, we're the emperors. So how do they look at a democracy like ours?
Well, I think China would love to live in peace with India for another 2,000 years. Because, I mean, for most of the 2,000 years, when India first emerged as a great civilization and China emerged as a great civilization, the Chinese regard Indian civilization as one that is equal to Chinese civilization. And they have a lot of respect for Indian civilization.
But, they don't want to live as equals, surely.
They'd be happy to live as equals. And it's funny. It's funny you should say that, because as to the best of my knowledge, I may be mistaken about some of the South Indian kingdoms. They may have paid tribute to China. But by and large, India has never paid tribute to China. Whereas, by the way, Vietnam has paid tribute to China. The Southeast Asian countries have paid tribute to China. Korea has paid tribute to China. Japan, in a very different, subtle way, has paid tribute to China. So I don't understand why Indians are obsessed about this question of paying tribute to China, because you never paid.
听着马凯说话的饼，显然说到了印度女主持人的心坎上，但是他还是对边境问题感到不安。马凯硕再次回归理性建议，提出可以利用技术手段解决边境摩擦问题，在敏感点安装双方共用的虚拟传感器，通过计算机系统监控与沟通，避免实体冲突。他强调，中印边境并非世界上唯一复杂的边境，其他地区的最佳实践值得借鉴。坎代巴杰帕伊的这一提议应得到中印双方的重视。
Long border that he has with India, doesn't he understand that this would upset Indians, and that basically that 1.2 billion Indians are now deeply distrustful of his country? I mean, that is.
As I said once again, on the border issue, I do not know the facts.
Isn't it common sense that somebody...
Soon after the border incident, he said the reason why the accident happened is because the Indian and Chinese soldiers had to meet face to face with each other to figure out...
the Galwan clash in June that you're talking about.
That's right. So he says, why not take away the soldiers, put virtual sensors in at all the sensitive points, and both sides have a common set of computers looking at the same sensors, and the computers will then talk to each other and say, why are you in this, why are you in that? And there's no more physical confrontations at the border. So you can use technology to solve some of these problems. And by the way, there are things called best practices in other difficult borders, that are also... The India-China border is not the only difficult border in the world. There are other borders, and you can learn best practices from other borders. And I would say Kanti Bajpayee's suggestion is an excellent suggestion that should be taken seriously by both China and...
谈及四方安全对话，马凯硕给出了地缘政治的核心规律：没有任何大国会为他国利益牺牲自身利益。地缘政治是残酷的博弈，只与利益相关，与情感、价值观、意识形态无关。他以澳大利亚为例，指出其因公开要求调查新冠疫情而冒犯中国，导致经济面临持续压力。而日本近期与中国外长的成功会晤，又说明各国都会根据自身利益调整对华关系。对于美国，他更是直言，特朗普政府取消对印度的普惠制，暂停 H-1B 签证，即便号称印度的朋友，最终还是基于自身利益行事。如果拜登政府认为需要与中国接触，四方机制的其他成员只能各自调整对华关系。马凯硕进一步警示，印度不应高估四方机制的可靠性。假设南亚发生冲突，澳大利亚非常不可能来南亚作战。反之，如果澳大利亚面临冲突，印度也未必会介入。他提醒印度，各国在地缘政治中都会优先考虑自身利益，不应将国家安全过度寄托于外部联盟。
Questions, Ambassador. The first is that the squad that has come into shape, which is India, Australia, Japan, and Korea. Now, how does China look at these? I'm sorry, India, US, Japan, and Australia. Sorry about that. How does the US look at this quad, especially when the world's most powerful country, the Americans, are very much part of it, part of the and expanding into this maritime domain?
Well, I mean, the one lesson I've learned in geopolitics is that no country, no great power will sacrifice its own interests for another power. So, for example, if the United States reaches a new understanding with China, right?
Under the new administration.
The Biden administration. And if the United States has to sacrifice other countries, it will do so. There's no such thing as friendship. And, if you want to know, ask any country what friendship with the United States is like, ask Pakistan. In the Cold War, Sabine Brzezinski went to the border and said, we Pakistanis, Afghans, and in the United States, we are together, and so on and so forth. They were very close, very close. The Cold War ended, Pakistan was dropped. Boom! And then 9/11 happened. Oh, boom! Pakistan became a friend again.
Right.
So geopolitics is a cruel business. It has nothing to do with sentiment, nothing to do with love, nothing to do with values, nothing to do with ideology. It only has to do with interests.
Right.
And where there's convergence of interest, there'll be cooperation. So, and for example, you mentioned the Quad. I think Australia is going through a very difficult time, as you know. And I suspect that Australia will go through a more difficult time in the coming months because Australia unwisely decided to slap China in the face by calling for an international public inquiry into what China did on COVID-19. It's true, China made mistakes on COVID-19, no question whatsoever. But you want to ask for something, do it quietly. Don't embarrass China publicly. But by slapping China in the face, they made China lose face. And for Chinese and Asians, losing face is a serious business. So, as you know, China has quietly, steadily increased the pressure on the Australian economy. So I think you'll find that Australia will become, it will be in a much tougher spot in the coming months. And then if you look at Japan, I want you to know that the Chinese foreign minister just had a very successful visit to Japan. Right? And I'm telling you all this just to make a simple point. It's very complex. It's not black and white.
Right.
And certainly in the case of the Biden administration, if the Biden administration doesn't want to be, Martin Wolf said in the Financial Times that the Biden administration could be an interlude between two Trump administrations unless Biden fixes the problem. And the United States of America is the only major developed country where the average income of the bottom 50% has gone down over a 30-year period. And as I explained in my book, Has China Won? I devote a whole chapter to it. The United States has become a plutocracy. So the United States is a very unhappy country. And the Biden is going to focus on the internal economic development of United States. And if he can work with the second largest economy to do it, I think he may or may not do it, depending on various factors. But Americans will go by where their interests lie. And as you know, the best thing that United States could do for India is to restore the generalized scheme of preferences that Trump took away. That did a lot of damage to Indian economy.
Right.
And restore the H-1B visas that were suspended for India, right? So, and why did even though Donald Trump is a friend of India, why did he do that? It proves my point. Countries will go with their own interest. Friendship means.
马凯硕认为，与其揪着和中国的边境问题不放，不如抱紧中国大腿做生意。
So, if the U.S. and China, if the Biden administration believes that it must reach out to China, then what happens to other members of the Quad, like India, for example?
Well, I would say, each member of the Quad will be working out its own long-term relationship with China in one way or another. And so I don't think, again, the Australians sent soldiers, and the Australians are very brave people. They went to fight in Europe in World War I. They went to fight in Europe in World War II, right? And because they feel this cultural affinity with the British and the Europeans. Now, let's say if there's a conflict in South Asia, would Australia come to fight in South Asia? Very unlikely.
No.
Very unlikely. So, and I think, and also vice versa, if there's a conflict between Australia and someone, I'm not sure whether India will go and, because countries have to decide where their interests lie. And I think the one small suggestion I have is that when it comes to geopolitics, Indians get very emotional. Don't get emotional. Please, never get emotional.
What do you think we get emotional about?
Oh, everything. Like your relations with China, you get very emotional. Why don't you sit down and do cold calculations on how you can use this relationship to your advantage rather than to your disadvantage? Because, there are various Indian strategic thinkers like Kautilya and all that. And what do they emphasize? You've got to be brutally cold and calculating in what you are doing and figure out the best thing to do. And so then come up with various options and don't get emotional about it.
女主持人似乎听进去了，继续问道：“印度现在应该怎么做的提问？”马凯硕给出了核心建议。当今世界的大游戏不再是军事，而是经济。拥有最大经济体的国家将拥有最大的影响力。他抛出关键数据：2009年，中国零售商品市场规模 1.8 万亿美元，美国4万亿美元，而到2019年，中国增长到6万亿美元，10年增长3倍。 美国则增长到5.5万亿美元，中国已超越美国，成为全球最大零售市场。他强调，各国增长经济的最佳方式是对接世界上最大的市场，越南等国正利用中国市场实现发展，印度也应抓住经济合作的机遇，而不是被边境问题的情绪裹挟。
A favorite philosopher these days, in your view, what do you think India should do now? Or what do you think Prime Minister Modi's government should do?
Well, I think the number one, the big game today is no longer military.
Mm-hmm.
The big game today is economic. And the countries with the largest economies will have the largest amount of influence. And let me give you one statistic, which every Indian should know. In the year 2009, 10 years ago, the size of the retail goods market in China was $1.8 trillion. The size of the retail goods market in the United States was $4 trillion, 2009.
Right.
More than double China's retail goods market. Fast forward 10 years, 2019, China's retail goods market had gone up to $6 trillion, 3 times in 10 years. The United States went up to 5.5. The retail goods market in the United States now is smaller than China. 10 years from now, China's will be much bigger than the United States. Now, look at all the 191 other countries in the world, leaving aside United States, China, India. Leave out of 190 countries, the 190 member states in India. If you are one of the members of the 190 countries and you are looking to grow your economy, the best way to grow your economy is to find the biggest market in the world and go and sell your goods. And that's how China succeeded. China used the United States market, which was far bigger than the Chinese market, to grow its economy. And today, lots of other countries, including Vietnam, they are all using the Chinese market to grow their economies, right?
Right.
And so you see, and so the game. So to compete in this game, India must grow its retail goods market to be one of the biggest in the world. That's the game. No, it's not about how many aircraft carriers you have, how many jet fighters you have. That's not the nature of the game anymore. It's about the size of your retail goods market.
整场访谈中，印度女主持人始终带着情绪化的批判视角，试图将中印关系简化为领土争端的单一维度，而马凯硕则以冷静的逻辑、丰富的案例、精准的数据，层层拆解地缘政治的复杂本质。他反复强调，印度应摒弃情绪化思维，避免被极度心理左右，更不能成为其他大国博弈的棋子，而是要以考底利耶强调的冷酷无情和精于算计，聚焦经济发展这一核心，通过对话与合作实现自身利益最大化。在大国博弈的棋局中，情绪从来不是解决问题的钥匙，只有清晰的利益计算与理性的战略选择，才能让国家在复杂的地缘政治格局中站稳脚跟。